Well, great to see you all. And it's very nice also to see our colleagues from South Asia in Switzerland in one room together. That's really great. And thank you so much for coming from Geneva as well and to exchange on that thing. So the idea of this presentation is really to give you some overview of our project, so where we stand at the moment, also in terms of research results, and then also in terms of the living labs or real world labs or whatever we want to call it. The presentation. So I will give the introduction, then hand over for the methodology section to Ginny, I think. Then Jordi will talk, Jordi and Biplop will talk about the riskscapes, right? And then is it Samia, you again, about the experimentation, and you again as well then for the experimentation? Okay, good. So this project has come about, the Solve4D project has come about from many different fields, though we have sort of in different constellations already worked together with other, under other projects. So like those are the roots of these mango trees, of this mango tree that came together under now the Solve4D project. And the idea is then also sort of to reflect today already a little bit on the Transformation Acceleration Grant. That's the label that the Solve4D program gives for the 4th year of programming, where particularly the scaling up will be also very important. Yeah, so here you have the faces of all the project members from the different teams, Everybody of you in this room and online will know where the Sundarbans are located. And the perhaps interesting thing about our project is that it does not only cover one country, but 2 countries. And we have already realized that this kind of transboundary collaboration is relatively rare, way too rare. And really quite happy that we have been able to bring that together under this project. Now you see here a kind of a satellite picture of the Sundarbans. Probably will not work very well with this audience here, but in other audience, I would ask the question, what are your images? What is your imaginary? What do you think about the Sundarbans when you hear that name? It's the Sundarbans. So you a bit. Yes.
I have the image of the Mekong Delta, water and rice.
Water and rice.
More water than rice.
Good. Cyclones perhaps as well, right? Good. And indeed, cyclones are kind of important in this area. And I should first show you sort of the 2 localities where we will work in more detail. And we come back to that in Punyamari, it's like an island in the West Bengal side, and Asasuni a little bit further up north, and the Bangladesh side. What is also quite important about the Sundarbans, we hear about the Royal Bengal tiger, they are located in the protected forest zone. What one thinks less about is that aspect that you mentioned about the rice. It's also a little bit north of the protected area. It's a habitat for humans. And there's a huge population there. I think about 7 million people living in the Sundarbans totally. And they gain their livelihoods through rice cultivation, but also many other activities, as we will see later on. So here, just some simulation of how the different locations have been affected by a series of cyclones. Ayla was a very important one in 2009. People still remember it. Then Bulbul, 6 years ago, again, a huge devastation. Then Amphan, during COVID, which sort of complicated the relief efforts. Yas more recently, and then since Yas, there have been another series of cyclones that we have not mapped here. So yes, cyclones are an event. They're of course thought to increase in intensity and frequency due to climate change. But that is not the whole story, and that is quite important for our project. There's many other kind of natural hazards and risks in this area. The cyclones are often followed by floods. There's salinization there. There is issues of tiger attacks, as we will hear more about, and so on and so forth. However, there's for this area, because of this kind of being affected by climate change, there have been different organizations that thought, oh, well, this area is, at least part of this area is not kind of suitable for living. And so one approach that has been promoted is the approach of managed retreat. The idea here is that one makes some simulations, seawater level, seas of climate change, cyclones, and so on and so forth, has some predictions there. Then based on that data, one would kind of demarcate, define the areas that are considered no longer livable, and people living in those spaces would then be relocated in a planned way. So that's this whole idea of managed retreat. The idea is to move up to 1 million people. Our project is quite critical towards that, and we are actually thinking maybe one can develop local alternatives to this type of managed retreat. You can imagine both Bangladesh and West Bengal are already densely populated, and moving 1 million people somewhere will not go without conflict or tensions, at least. Now, good, okay. No. So let's sort of think a little bit about the concepts. And this idea of managed retreat is very much based on a mainstream understanding of climate hazard. Global climate change is in the center of the kind of the analysis. And based on that, one should take climate policies and actions that would include engineered kind of solutions in terms of embankments and so on and so forth. But then, as I mentioned already, this idea of the managed retreat. Our project wants to look at this whole thing a little bit in a more complex and also in a more bottom-up understanding. We start already from the idea that not everybody shares the same view of climate change. There's plural understandings and perceptions of different actors, and these understandings are often even linked to different epistemologies. Rather than just looking at climate hazard as a kind of a uniform, unique hazard, we rather consider the riskscape that combines multiple risks, that combines but also different perceptions of different people of what the risks actually are. And linked to that, the idea of the riskscape is then also the idea of a social resilience to respond to these multiple risks based on place-based solutions, inclusive approaches, needs-driven and rather bottom-up interventions. So that's, in a nutshell, our social resilience approach. Now, when we look at the two fields, they are quite different. And here you have actually a map. It's not our field sites, but nevertheless, it's a sort of a satellite picture. On the left side, you have India. On the right side, you have Bangladesh. And if you are a little bit familiar with the interpretation of satellite imagery, you will see quite quickly that the land use is very different on these two sides. On the left side, you have really paddy cultivation. That goes back to your idea. On the right side, you have aquaculture, particularly shrimp cultivation. That also means that the land use is not just influenced by climate change or by morphological characteristics, but very much also by human action, or let's say political economic factors that in the case of Bangladesh favored particularly the extension of shrimp cultivation. Now, quickly to the experimentation sites. Here you have mapped Pratap Nagar in Bangladesh. So that the space, the area is dominated by shrimp farming. There's in many places high salinity. Sluice gates or embankments are often not maintained properly. There's a high vulnerability in many places. I'm not going into the detail here. So the issue of shrimp cultivation and so on and so forth is not so present in the case of Kumimari on the Indian side, where land use is still dominated by rice cultivation. Salinities are not that high because of functioning or partly functioning embankments. There's fishing, but it's mostly freshwater fish that is cultivated in ponds, not only, and there's also high vulnerability nevertheless. Good. That's the first introductory part, and I hand over now to Ginia for explanations on our methodology.
Okay, thank you, René. Okay, so as René mentioned that climate science or climate hazard, as it is understood, there is a lot of hardcore science and engineering perspective that have gone into this, and it is very difficult to think about what are the alternative visions. Even there is a debate about whether what is mainstream and what is alternative, because the perceptions and the practices that are prevalent in the Delta, it is for a period, a long period of time. It has a very long temporal trajectory, and it goes back to pre-colonial times, and we don't really have a lot of documentation in terms of what happened in those pre-colonial time periods. So what we try to do here is that in this project we took up a multimodal approach, or a multimodal methodological approach, where we try to use and deploy some methods, and then integrate findings from each of these methods. And this also provides us with an opportunity to triangulate data. I mean, when I say this, of course, there are disclaimers, and triangulation is not possible across each pieces and components of data or data set, but one at least try to get an overview understanding of the different types of perceptions and understandings and worldviews that shaped people's understandings about risks in the Delta. So if we are talking about mainstream methodologies again, the three primary methodological approaches, or the three key activities in this project are archival research and ethnography and experimentation. So we try to talk about the A2E approach for this Engage project, where A implies archival. And why archival? Because as you have seen the site, this is transboundary Sundarbans. And if you take a look into the colonial history, then Bangladesh and India, they were not separate countries. So it was part of, Sundarbans was definitely part of the Indian subcontinent. And so the documents, the state records in the form of revenue documents, in the form of proceedings, in the form of several administrative records and reports. These are available. Part of it is definitely available in the India Office Record section in the British Library, but also, a good chunk of, these archival materials are available at NAI, National Archives of India, West Bengal State Archive, and also the annex building of National Library. For certain period of time, roughly like 8 to 9 months, we tried to consult and access these archival materials. But then the thing is that, here you get the perspective of the state, of the colonial state, because, this colonial period is very important in terms of reclamation of the delta, because there are simultaneous currents that one can actually locate in the colonial archives. On one hand, the colonizers were complaining about that the place was marshy, swampy, and full of malaria, and it is, of course, an icon of wilderness. But at the same time, they were wise enough to identify that if Sundarbans could be reclaimed, then they could earn a lot of revenue from this particular delta, because it had agricultural value. So in this entire period of roughly 200 or a little more than 200 years is about the history of land reclamation. That is completely clear, from these archival records. And if you see the revenue reports, you will see that how the revenue earnings kept on increasing from one decade to the next. What is also important, which I think our next speaker will take up from here, about the findings from the archival research, which I'll not cover now, but the statist perception and vision about disaster, about risk, about hazards, we were able to trace from these archival records. But then, this is not the whole story, of course, because these are some of the books. Some of the books are also in Bengali. For example, this is Manosha Mongol Kabbo, which is part of this vernacular literature, like medieval literature that flourished in the medieval period, that is the pre-colonial period. And this is one particular, anthology. It's called Sundarbans Samagro by one of the Bengali, novelists. And because, and some of the other books here, these books or these stories, so the novels, for example, the short stories, they shed light on how people inhabited the delta, cohabiting with the forest and the flora and fauna, of course, of the region, and how they coped with disasters for a long period of time. So it provides, these books, this vernacular literature provide a lot of details about social relations in the delta before the coming of the British, but also after the coming of the British. And we get to know several things, like, for example, the exploitative, the forest bureaucracy, the exploitative nature of forest bureaucracy, and how, the forest department, by introduction or imposition of laws, British laws, which the people were completely unaware of in the pre-colonial times, how, there was a kind of a metabolic rift which was created between the communities and, the forest, for example. So, what we have tried to do is that, so in our archival research component, we have not only looked into the colonial archive, but we are also trying to get data and information from vernacular literature, and using an eco-critical approach. We are trying to see how, fiction also provides us with information about risks, disasters, and hazards in the delta. Okay, and apart from that, the next method which was applied was the ethnography method. So ethnography, it also, the two main methods which were applied were household surveys and different and other forms of qualitative interviews and, like qualitative methods, including focus group discussions with elderly women, focus group discussions with identified communities and clusters, and key informant interviews, and other traditional methods which are generally which forms or which constitute qualitative research methodology. But the household surveys were actually interesting in the sense that from some of our focus group discussions and when there were some informal on-site conversations which went on in the field, there was lot of momentum was generated. So in our from our next speakers, we will also get to know that how this project, to an extent, it is being able to build some momentum in the experimentation sites. So what is happening or what has happened here is that, so when we started discussing the tool, the questionnaire, the household questionnaire with the volunteers, mainly from our field implementing partners, then there was an interest which they showed, where they said that so they started giving us a lot of critical feedback on the tool. And there were iterative rounds which were taking place to finalize the household tool. And from the inputs that we started getting from the people over there, there was a general consensus which was formed that maybe the people, they could actually try to interview their own their own communities from some of the neighborhoods that are completely familiar to them. So in this way, 7 we call them inhabitant interviewers. So 7 inhabitant interviewers, they actively participated in the process of data gathering or data collection, and they also got the training from because Biplab and Biplab came to Kuminmari, so there was a kind of an exchange where he came here and he organized training workshops with our field implementation partner and the team who were ready to do this. And of course, after some challenges, some hurdles, finally they were able to implement it in the field. So we found that this process really had a positive impact. Of course, later we can have some questions about the biases and manipulation and other things for sure. But I think it really it was a nice process, because and a nice process of exchange and engagement, and which gave a lot of confidence to them. And they were also they got the opportunity to probe deeper into some of these questions. And yes, and it was, so there had to be a mechanism, a more formal mechanism, through which every day the data that was being collected and sent at the back end, that was also monitored, to not to compromise with the quality of the data. So it's a long process. I will not elaborate on this any more, and if you have questions, I'll be happy to take those questions later. But yes, the second major method of household survey, complemented by findings from other qualitative research methods, was done in the second phase of the project. And then now I think, and now the experimentation has started. But before that, I think Shaurodeep, I would now like to invite Shaurodeep to talk about, to shed more light on the findings from the application or deployment of both archival and ethnographic methods.
So sure. So thank you all. So now I am starting going deeper into the results coming out of our multiple methodological approaches just discussed by ma'am, Professor Jinia Mukherjee. So this is the first method of archival approach. This is archiving the delta. Actually, this is from the colonial rulers perspective, where we have consulted all the gazetteers, colonial reports, proceedings, letters, that capturing the accounts of losses, damages, and multiple outbreak of different kinds of calamities. Through this, what revealed out of those accounts of causality and fund allocation, that is, what are the severe natural calamity outbreaks. Next, what was the grade and state of loss and impacts upon the people and community. Third, how the institutions, both formal and informal, responded to these various outbreaks, like the local zamindars, the imperial state, and the different sanctions were made accordingly. Despite that, there were some hard infrastructural development in terms of protecting those marshy area, as ma'am has just mentioned that their agenda of reclamation from that marshland to high revenue yielding area. So they have to protect those land through the hard infrastructures like embankment, bridges, good roads. Besides that, parallelly, they also put stress on the scientific development, that is, for example, the development of meteorological scientific department, as well as developing meteorological science rigor for the forecasting of such outbreaks. Despite that, there is another angle which came out between the lines from these archival accounts, because hence its rulers' archives, there is always an archival silence. So through this, some bits and pieces of how people or community were coping with such extreme events, and how the localized kind of practices were taken to cope with those outbreaks were generated from these archives. And from these archival approaches, what we found out that revealed a historical production of a landscape of risk. That is, we are calling riskscapes, borrowing the idea of riskscape framework as developed by Muller-Mann, from which has been evolved from the idea of Mustafa's hazardscapes and also other things. Historically, this is the first riskscape in Sundarbans we have identified across the times and space. The first one, the riskscape of natural disasters. After the colonial rulers' intervention, the political alteration took place, and that riskscapes has been altered to the revenue generating colonizers through their colonial hydrologies like watertight dams, and then there became an alteration of flood, because the flood, which was regarded as a blessing for the high cultivation or high harvest yielding, now the floods are seen as menace and risk. So this legacy has been carried forward after the independence as well. Also, the same kind of embanking system were imposed to the Indian Sundarbans, and top-down measures were taken by the present rulers, which found the absence of local voice and local aspirations. And the recent phenomena of climate change has accelerated the scenario and aggravated it more. And with the outcomes of different outbreaks, as revealed from our household survey, the most three pressing risks, like one, coastal erosion, next the cyclone, and third, flood. As an outcome, with ill-managed embankment, the problem of salinization has appeared as the most severe problem as per the perception of our inhabitants in Kumirmari. So on the other side, there is another kind of riskscape, that is the risk of wilderness, which appeared before the colonizers. They started with their administrative alteration of that landscape through their reclamation venture, and scientific forestry came with their colonial hydrological approach. And they started, besides having reclaiming the land, they started things like biodiversity conservation as well as mangrove conservation. So now from these times onward, the threat was the intrusion of habit, the threat was before the rulers to protect this landscape for their own profit of mangrove biodiversity, vegetation, and revenue earning from the local inhabitants through denying their access into the forests. And sometimes they are labeled as intruders, and they borrowed the idea of fortress conservation, and that has been inherited in the post-colonial rulers as well, and they enacted subsequent laws, made core buffer demarcation. As a result, the community, the local inhabitants who were inhabiting the land since time immemorial with those forest commons, their rights have been denied to access all such things. And with that, the recent development of global environmental lobbies who who calls for the managed retreat, also they advocate for the pristine forest, just excluding the local forest dependent inhabitants, citing them as the victim of multiple risks. And the recent problem of COVID-19 also led people more dependent on the forest resources. And simultaneously, from the other escape, the problem of salinization that impacted on the people's livelihood, because these people are mostly reliant on farming and fishing practices. So this problem of salinization led them much more dependent on the forest resources, as they could produce a ready cash out of those collections. And now the escapes of mangrove and biodiversity loss, it turning into a escape of human-tiger conflicts. So the interaction between these two risks of salinization and human-tiger conflict, that leading to a direction of livelihood loss and ever marginalization of the community, and that revealing the need for the place-based income generation. So this is some snippet. Yeah, these are the snippets of our household survey. These are the most pressing risk as per the community perception, and these are the way out and way forward as per the long run adaptation program. So these are three infrastructural needs like embankment, sluice, and new canal. And the fourth one is people emphasize to depend on agroecological practices. So this household survey method was complemented by qualitative ethnographic interventions like FGDs and KIIs. So these are the snippets of people's local risk, plural risk perception, and possible way around as they perceived through their experience of coping through the localized inland fishing. Now, I'd request Samia ma'am for the next section.
Thank you. So this is, again, as we said, Sundarbans is one ecosystem here. So a lot of the data or from the archival, as well as from the risk tape work that Jyoti presented, is also similar. We're not, for time, not going to show the survey results from the Bangladesh side, but there is this basket of risks, some similar, some are different. And what for Bangladesh, one of the key things that also poses as a risk from historical till now is this land conversion to shrimp farming. This started in the 80s, farmers-driven experimentation in the 1980s, and then it was considered, gold, one of the third largest exports of Bangladesh. So people were forced to convert their farms to shrimp farming, and then this became very capital intensive and export market driven as well. And you can see the numbers that 150,000 farms employing over 600,000 workers converted on the Bangladesh side to shrimp farming. But as already mentioned, the natural hazards, climate change, increase in salinity, all that also exacerbated by, as you can see, this zone in red shows the area that's affected by salinity intrusion, and the potential risks of sea level rise up to 30 centimeters. All of these areas will be impacted. This also corresponds to all the converted land that happened to do shrimp farming. So there is this additional risk and hazard that is impacting our sites in Bangladesh. So along with the policy-driven changes, initiatives to convert to farming, what has resulted is a lot of land grabbing by large farmers and further marginalizations of the small holding farmers. And so what you allowed the water to come in, saline water, a lot of land grabbing happened, and all this is really what sets the context for the work that we're doing here in Bangladesh, which my colleagues will be talking about. This is the basis of that work. So again, that was just to add on. So we're not showing some of the household surveys from our side, but again, the embankment, erosion, along with the other items shown are some of the different characteristics that makes the riskscapes in Bangladesh. We're now going to move to what we're doing. As Jenny mentioned, we did the archival research. We did the surveys to understand, the riskscapes, and now, some of the local experimentation that each team, each countryside we're doing. And again, it's different because it's driven, contextualized to the local context. What might work in one side doesn't work for another. Hence, we're kind of following parallel experimentation, learning from one another, but then, very much community driven and seeing, what the people want to do in terms of building their resilience, social resilience in that area. So I will first, it's
because I was checking if it is admitting anyone coming, but it's okay. No.
What? Oh,
There is no one.
okay, but I still can't go to the next slide.
French. I'm not online.
Well, just to say, the first of our works will be presented by Dr. Anuradha on the experimentation that I can't get to the slides, but I'd like to.
It's okay now.
Yeah, it's okay. Great. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Before. Yeah. This. Yeah.
Okay, so now you have a background about what is happening in these different sites. So I'll just talk to you about what we're trying to do in Sundarbans itself to make the situation better. And what we are seeking to do with the community in particular is to see how we can improve their livelihood options so that they are not forced to go into the forest and, to put their life at risk by trying to catch crab or honey in the forest, using forest resources. So maybe they'll do that side by side, but also to increase their livelihood options within the islands. So that's what we're trying to do. So initially we got a clock project, and there we did a knowledge to action, K2A kind of a pilot study, where we selected a pond. So in the island of Kumirmari itself, which has a population of almost 4,300 households approximately, there are about 3,000 inland pukurs, or these small ponds next to the houses. So in these houses, we find that these ponds that they have, some of them, they're in different degrees of fishing that takes place in these ponds. So we said that let's see if we can improve the quantum of fish that is coming out of those ponds. So we did a pilot to see how we can literally dredge out a whole pond afresh. And right from the inception till its production, we did a complete documentation of the entire process. And we found that when you are implementing it, or when you're applying more scientific methods in the culturing of fish in these kinds of ponds, then the yield is almost 6 times the amount in a very short period. So this became a viable option to look at increasing their livelihood options within the island itself, so that they're not forest dependent, as much dependent on the forests. So from there, we went on to do a kind of a canal fishing. So the project for SOR4D is that we've chosen a canal. Now, how did we choose that canal? And that's the process that we will talk to you briefly about. So first, we did the mapping of how many canals there are. So there were about 25 natural canals and 1 man-made canal, so 26 all in all. But then in order to choose which one is doable, we made a tool where we identified various factors that will determine which is the best canal to choose. So one is, of course, as you can see, certain characteristics. There were 6 river fed. So the river fed ones, we kept them aside because it's salt water. So we've kept those aside. Beside that, we had 20 rain fed ones. But even within those rain fed ones, there were different degrees of naturally embanked ones, or, man embanked ones, that will allow fishing to take place in a regulated, controlled manner. So there we saw that of these 26 that were there were about 5 or 6 that we had to eliminate because of the salt water intrusion in them. The remaining, there were about 15 of them that were going into the fields itself. So they were embanked to a certain area, but then they were in Bengali we say moje jawa, means they were going into the fields. So they were not proper for our selection for the canal fisheries. And so finally, by this process of selection, we came down to, we came down to about, we use these different approaches to arrive at our final choice. So one is that we talked to the local population, we developed a tool. And in that tool, we were looking basically at 4 points. So one was the geomorphology of the canal itself and seeing its potential for fisheries. The second one was that we were looking at the social factors around it. So we have chosen to work with populations that are more marginalized than the others. So those who did not have their own ponds available and were more dependent. So their livelihood options would be enhanced if we created this community-driven pond aquaculture, like canal aquaculture. The next one was, so that was a social part, a social component, and the relationship with the political bodies there. The third one was the potential itself, the resource potential of that particular canal. And the fourth aspect was the financial viability. So these were the 4 aspects on the basis of which we made tools. We did these on-site semi-formal questionnaires, FGDs. We used all these different ethnographic tools in order to acquire data about the different canals. And by that, we narrowed it down to about 3 canals. Then we had a team that came in from Indonesia. We had a team that came in from Indonesia, as you can see there. So they're working on urbanization and working with these kinds of activities. And with them, we narrowed it down finally to one khal, which is known as the Mukherjee khal, which is the one where we saw that they had best, all the features that we were looking for were ideally suited for that particular canal. And as you can see, we have all these FGDs there. So that was the on-site visit, FGDs. We had these brainstormings trying to narrow down with us. And then the final stage was that we brought in community leaders from across the island and also political. We had very good representation, stakeholder representations. And with them, we sat and as you can see, Renee and all were there also. We did a workshop to see how we can pinpoint. So we gave them the last 3 of the canals that we had narrowed down. And we said, if you had to select a canal on which we should try out this community fishing thing, which one would be the best? And by the factors that they gave in, we narrowed down on the particular one that we've selected for now. So after this for
Right, thank you. So what we did in Bangladesh side after identification of the risk and the risk escapes, so if we zoom in, what actually those risks affecting, how those risks are affecting the communities, the people, what we see that, and what are the initiatives those communities are taking. So before our intervention, what was the situation? So what happened in Bangladesh Pratapnagar field site that in 2020, Cyclone Amphan, it triggered a huge flooding. And as a response of the flood, communities, they elected a new leadership to respond how this flood manage the flood situation. So that new leadership, local council leadership, they banned the shrimp enclosures inside the embankment area, flood embankment area in Pratapnagar. So that was the community own initiative to ban salinity, to put a restriction on shrimp farming. So it's not something that countrywide happened, it happened in very particular community. The community decided they don't want shrimp farming anymore. So as a result, the agriculture returned to those area. And women, they were very proactive in this whole process. They wanted agriculture. So they heavily involved in vegetable cultivations and poultry rearing. So when you have salinities, saline water, all those agricultural activities is not possible. So that was community's own initiative. So when they started doing agriculture after the cyclone Amphan, they faced some challenges. The challenges were access to the land, because the land is still saline and it's fragmented. So it's very difficult to do cultivation. Financial limitations, access to finance was another major challenge for them. Irrigation, to do agriculture, you need irrigation, you need fresh water. And since it was previously heavily dominated by shrimp enclosures and farming, salination was a challenge. Another major challenge was whatever agriculture productions they were able to produce, the lack of local value addition was one of the biggest challenge, because they produce some vegetables, but there is no market access, there is no value addition, so it goes waste. So these market access, local value addition challenges, irrigation, these were the existing challenge for scaling of agroecological activities in the Pratapnagar. So in that context, we design our project. We co-design the intervention with the community, what kind of support they need. So they explicitly express their preference for agroecological practices rather than shrimp or other commercial farming methods. So based on the research we did, the ethnographic research and household survey, it was very clear that community prefer agroecological practices. And what they express is that they want an extended value addition system at the local community. So the agriculture product can be turned into goods, the local level, that has a high market demands. And the enhancing market linkage is one of another area to support. So if that happens, they believe, and we also believe, that it will benefit the broader community, not only the participants of the project, but overall the community. So what we did to rectify the land use and financial access problems, what we did, we create commons, farmer commons. So there are like 30 farmers, some have land, some don't, some has some financial ability, some does not have financial ability. So we created 6 different farming commons. They're all coming together, put their resources in a common resource pool, so they can rent or they can lease a land, they can start cultivating. It's a bit larger scale, not in their tiny homestead household plot, but a bit of larger plots. So that's the one part. And besides these 6 farmer commons, we also supported the community to form official farmer associations that registered in the government system, so that they can access finance and other government subsidies. And we supported a local entrepreneur to set up a processing factories, so that will process agricultural products within the community to send it to the markets and for better profits. And there is a Dhaka-based startup. We connected that startup that works on the agroecological products. So we connected them with the communities, with the farmers. So now they're taking their products to the high-end market in Dhaka and elsewhere to sell those products countrywide. Yeah, now I'm inviting myself to the next.
Thank you. So the next thing is we selected some of the monoculture field. Those are paddy field. So these paddy fields are mostly they used to have it from their first generation to second generation and so on. So we as they are in the vulnerable community, they don't want to take challenges that in a large scale we only need to produce paddy, not the other things. But we somehow manage them that let's see, it's our piloting. We can start the monoculture field to this one was the rice field, and now we turned it into a intercropping polyculture field, where we use our own knowledge on nature-based solution practices. Also, the saline, it's a highly saline intrudatory area. So we giving some sort of training on their organic materials, organic matters, so they can turn saline soil into the reduce the saline to good soil properties. We introduce the diversified crops because we targeted 4 crops from the 70 of the available locally produced crops. These are also selected by them, and they have the market quality, market available, market value. The crops were sunflowers, beetroots, pandan seeds, and mustard oil. Beside that, we also introduce more than 10 other intercropping things. So our model is also similar to the Andhra Pradesh. We want to produce more and more crops in different times, and that one we can harvest, another will come, and this will go on and on. And also we introduce the locally lit adaptation. So these are our intercropping things. So here is brinjal and other things, and the men are also there. The women are working in the paddy field, and this is the last production. We produce the high yield beetroot. We cutting it so they're cutting it for their own, and they're also taking it to slices, and they're drying it and producing the beetroot powder for the things. We also consider the biodiversity intervention here. So when we culture only the monoculture things, the biodiversity are lessly coming there. But for intercropping and multiple cropping, we found different kind of like honeybee, mustard, bumblebees, and other animals are coming in our fields. So this is the regular farmer meeting. Meeting and our all activities from Bangladesh.
That's fine then. It's fine. There's no talking.
So yeah, these are the organic things we produce from the locally, and we also, these are the snapshots from our aid and practices in Bangladesh part. And thank you from our side, and we are welcoming. Yeah. Renee, yes, come.
Yeah, just finishing. So there's no slide to this. We have still to develop that. Just the finishing that we are sort of naturally now sort of kind of analyzing and seeing whether the different experimentations or real world labs have an actual positive impact socioeconomically, but also environmentally. And if so, we would then sort of try to go for a fourth year of funding and sort of see how to scale these things up. And well, these are questions that we treat afterwards amongst us. Also, I mean, I just have in my head first of all already to answer what exactly we want to scale up. But I leave it here in an informal way.